it's possible to make your way up the stakes without a theory-based approach, but I find it useful in terms of learning. Like I've only recently, to be honest with you, bought my first solver because I just haven't had the time, or it hasn't been necessary for my channel, which is probably my priority over my own play, which I've tried to adjust in the last month or so.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Carrot Poker Podcast, episode 100. Episode 100, guys. I tried to get Doug Polk for episode 100. Didn't happen. He never got back to me. But we've got a lovely young man, Nick Eastwood, whose channel I've been checking out on YouTube recently. Nick, welcome.
Thank you very much for having me, Peter.
Yeah, it's good to have you
I
here.
feel a lot of pressure about being number 100, though.
Yeah,
I didn't realise that was going to be.
I forgot to warn you.
Oh, yeah. Right.
You're number 100, so it better be like the best fucking interview ever, Nick. You know, it has to be.
I'm not sure what I can provide, but I'll do my very best to be entertaining at least.
No, I really don't care about the 100 thing. Like people in my Discord channel were like, oh,
clearly not, because I'm
who are you gonna get? Who are you gonna get for 100? I was like, I don't care. I just want a normal guest. Like, why do round numbers?
Yeah, cue the dislikes for this one.
Yeah. So let's just start by telling everyone a little bit about you. I saw a video with you and Ben Abadby, who's like a fairly well-known 500 Zoom GTO boss sort of reg from the UK. So you've known Ben out in and outside of poker for a bit, and you've done a few videos with him. What else do you sort of do on your channel, and what's it aimed at?
So I guess I'll start from the beginning, really. Like obviously at the start of last lockdown, I was furloughed, so I decided to start. I had like a little channel where I did like a couple of videos. They weren't very good, but like just to like help me, so I could watch them back and see what I thought of like my own analysis and things like that. And I just started making this thing called the Quarantine Grind early back in like March, February last year, as soon as the lockdown started, and just recording myself playing and then just uploading it. And then like quite a few people were saying it was useful to them. So while it started out as like a way of me improving, and also a way of me like keeping myself accountable for my decisions in a way that I was not doing if I was off camera. So like I would talk through every decision, and I felt like I was making like much better decisions if I was recording. And if I wasn't recording, then I was like clicking buttons and then being like, oh, let's just go and play a different game or something, like, because I can't be bothered with this. But I just needed it for me to, you know, make marked improvement in my game and think about the game way more. I was just not thinking about enough about it whilst I was playing. So that's how it started, really. And then a lot of people were saying that it was useful. They liked how I thought about the game, you know, stuff like that. So I just kept doing it. Built like a very small sort of base, I guess, but like not really. And then towards like the middle end of the year, I didn't do any videos at all. Like I sort of like tailed off a little bit in terms of my content. And then I realized that I was getting like quite a few subscribers while I wasn't making anything. So I was like, oh, well, I guess I'll just give this a go, kind of thing. And I had a friend that the channel knows very well called Bean. His real name is Ed. But we made this just idea of like a couple of videos that we do together, and he would just come on. He's basically like the channel clown, if you like. And like he's not like the best player in the world, but people just seem to really enjoy like me looking at his hands and us talking about them and things like that. So I guess from there it just sort of like took off a little bit. I had a few video ideas. Wasn't streaming at that point, but yeah, I had a few video ideas, and obviously the main one that people will probably know if they know me is Punt or No Punt, which is probably the main source of, I guess you could say, success. But like where it started to like quite do a little bit better than the channel, that is. Mm-hmm. And then just getting a few different people on for that. So, but yeah, obviously since I started doing like putting a lot of work into like thumbnails and working hard on the content and putting myself out there as like a content creator kind of thing, and then getting my stream set up for the after the Christmas in this lockdown, yeah, pretty much, you know, doubled or tripled my subs since the start of the year, just through pure content and things like that. So yeah, I don't know why people like me, to be honest. Like, obviously a lot of it is to do with and where I started it to begin with, there's just not a lot of people making microstakes content. Like, no one really cares about the microstakes community, you know. They're just left in this rake trap of death where they can never get out, and everything that you want to get in terms of worthwhile coaching is like $100 for a month subscription, or you know, very little like in the way of engaging content to learn from on YouTube. There's no free content anywhere really that's like worth looking at. So I guess it was just sort of like a gap in the market for me in a way, but also for the people playing microstakes, because I come from microstakes, and everyone has to come from microstakes unless you start with a massive role, you know. Everyone knows what it's like to be there and feel like you're just getting eaten up by rake and no one really cares about you, unless you're giving them, you know, quite a lot of your hard-earned, you know, 10 buy-ins a month for, you know, one of these really good, obviously, subscriptions. You know, everyone will know what they are, but it's a lot of money for someone also paying 10 big blinds, 100 in rake, you know. So I guess that's where it started from, and then from there, just sort of people seem to like the kind of things I'm doing, and then obviously Ben coming on boomed the channel massively. So that's where I am now.
Yeah, so much to come back at there. I do want to ask you a bit more about the format of Punt or No Punt, because it is definitely the most entertaining thing I saw when I was looking through your channel. I thoroughly enjoyed watching an episode of that. We'll come back to that in a second, but first, more on this microstakes situation. There's quite a debate going on right now between like the investment approach, which I feel like people are being kind of forced into a lot more these days, with rake being so high, rake back being, as you say, so unreasonable. What like, is there still, in your opinion, a route out of the microstakes for the player who doesn't want to invest money externally in coaching or in expensive subscriptions for things, and wants to build that bankroll from the bottom up?
I would say it's possible, but like, are you talking about organically doing that through self-learning or?
Yeah, let's say like not taking a big chunk of money from life and investing it either for expensive coaching or for a bankroll that would, you know, set you up for 50 NL. Like, what about the guy that wants to take $300 or whatever it may be and turn that into 10k? What are his chances these days, and what can he do in this environment?
I mean, to be honest, like, it depends on their background. Like, obviously there's a lot of bankroll challenges, and you could see like a lot of these bankroll challenges, they don't go that well for people doing them early on. It's tough to beat, like, over the rake. Is the rake is just, obviously everyone knows, and I have my obviously opinions on that, but if you're not getting any help, I think that and you're like a newer player and you're trying to learn, the very least you're going to need is like a partner to talk to about hands, or just something to, like, even if you watch content that's like not, or you don't agree with it, like, that's fine. Like, a lot of people, if you look through my comments, a lot of people don't agree with the decisions I make, but that's good, because it means you're watching something and, you know, and thinking about why you don't agree with it, right? Rather than just, you know, making, or not even thinking about why you're doing things, or bouncing those ideas off of people. That, accompanied by like that rake, I think that, to be honest with you, no, like, a very, very small percentage of people will get through that, and that's why they all just get stuck in that mire of 10 and L, you know, and below, because not if you've got like $300 and that's all you've got for poker, then you can't afford to pay $100 to a month for a subscription, because you're not gonna, unless you literally like study religiously, like, that would be the only way of getting that value out, that you'd have to like completely submerge yourself in that content and get every single last drop out of it. But then again, you're going to need to like not be working on the side and stuff like that, and have lots of free time to be able to do that. So in terms of like, can someone just chuck on $300 and start from like a decent poker knowledge and get through without any help? I'd say the chances for them are really low. So yeah, you have to like really weed out and try and find some content just to think about why you don't, even if it's awful, like, just to disagree with it in your head and start to think more logically about the game. Just start to break down spots for yourself. Like, the one thing I say to people is just talk to yourself. If depending on your living situation, just talk to yourself through the hands, and start to form a process in your head that can guide you to a better, like, lane of decision making. But no, the answer to your question in the most roundabout way is very, very difficult. And I guess that's what I'm trying to offer people that really want to try to improve, but don't want to pay to improve because they can't afford it, or they're not sure whether they want to, get super deep into it right now. Just a way in to thinking about the game in more than just a level 1, level 2 kind of way, and thinking, and just like how they can, without those resources, start to improve themselves and maybe start to beat the stakes.
Yeah. It's funny, I was talking to a good friend of mine today who isn't a poker player in any way and has never been into poker before. But he was sort of saying, I checked out some of your streams and some of your YouTube videos because I miss you, man. I just was looking at you in those, and it made me feel a bit close to you because I've not seen you in 6 months. I was like, man, that's really sweet. And we had a chat about it, but then he was like, but then I started to get into poker a little bit and I started to watch a bit of it. And I was like, okay, and how did you find it? And he was like, well, there's all these terms that are like really confusing. It just sounds like really sort of like an academic field. And I was like, man, that's exactly what poker is. It's super academic. Yeah, I think what I like about your channel, Nick, is that you embrace that, and like you're talking about hands at high level, with Ben Abadbeat and others and stuff like that. And it's that critical thinking aspect that you outlined there. I think that's incredibly important. And I think like a lot of the content out there, the issue with it is it's so unrigorous, it's so unacademic. It's just like, oh yeah, we're going to bet for value here. Oh yeah, we're going to just use this sizing to target King X. And it turns poker into this, like, I don't know, this sport almost, as if it's muscle memory or something, but it's not. It's a very complicated academic discipline, right? So I like that about your channel, and some of the analysis you do there. In terms of microstakes, yeah, man, it's really tough. I would say invest a bit of money like you would in a business. That can go a long way. So tell us a bit about Punt or No Punt. This is one of the more analytical yet comedic formats that you and Ben have done. How does that work?
Yeah, sort of a balance between the two, but like it obviously it didn't start with Ben. It started with the guy I mentioned earlier, Bean, as my channel will know him as, one of my very best real life friends. And we were just during lockdown, like he bought a laptop, and that's how we started. We were bouncing off of each other, and we bought a subscription, and we were talking about every day, just like, because we had nothing else to do, just talking through stuff and all that. He kind of tailed off a little bit. He feels like it's not really for him now. But back then when we first started, like I remember being at work and coming home being like, I've got an idea, Dean. Why don't we just like take some of your horrendous hands and be like, do a series called Punt or No Punt where we just see whether they're like awful or they're all right. And he was like, yeah, I'm up for that. So he just made that, and then it didn't, to be honest with you, the first 2 episodes like didn't do that well. I guess obviously with anything it depends on what kind of guest that you have, but it just sort of started from there really. And then I didn't really have any other guests but him on until Ben popped into my stream one day, and I was like, Ben, Punt or No Punt, and he was like, yeah, keen. And I was like, okay, this is going to be really good. So obviously got him to review mine as well. And now it's just sort of like the cornerstone of the channel, I would say, in terms of like, it's sort of like obviously a way of collaborating, and you'll know obviously all the advantages of collaboration on YouTube and stuff like that. Adds a lot of interest to everyone's channels, and it helps everyone grow. But yeah, it's just a real fun way of breaking down hands. Like we obviously do go into a lot of detail as well. Like some of the episodes are up to an hour long. I've got one coming up on Tuesday that I recorded, and I didn't realize it was an hour long until I looked at this, until I edited it back. So we do go into a lot of detail, but we have obviously a lot of fun with it. And now we've sort of got this theme of the last hand being just this absolute like whale off hand where, it's just something you're never ever going to see again. So I think that it just keeps poker fun, because sometimes we forget that it's supposed to be enjoyable, and a lot of people I feel like don't really enjoy it enough. So I like that it blends the two, but also obviously we keep it very serious during points of the hand, and that like the principle of it is, if obviously for the people that haven't watched it before, is that whoever the host is, like obviously had Ben guest host my hands, but the person who's looking at the hands, usually me, can't have seen them before. So it's just sort of like breaking them down in terms of like I haven't prepared for this. I've just got to look at it and decide whether this person is punting or not.
Yeah.
And I just feel like, it just strikes a good balance between from when I first started playing poker in like my conservatory way back in the day with my friends when I was horrendous, just brings that like fun back to the game that I think I lost for a number of years. So a bit of a deep answer, but that's really it. And I'd actually like to take this opportunity to invite you at some point in the future to play.
Absolutely. I'd be more than happy to come on the show. We'll do a little taster to that today, actually, because I know you've prepared a few hands for us to talk about in the audience later. I'm not sure if they're of the ilk of punt or no punt or not, but if they are, then we can...
They're arguable. Like, they could probably fit in there, to be honest.
Yeah.
You can give me a punt or no punt if you like.
Yeah, or I'll give you like some other, maybe if it's not a punt, I'll give you like some other kind of derogatory slur to your play. It'll be fine.
Absolutely fine. Yeah. You can use the words.
I think that's great though, like that you developed that ability to sort of not take yourself too seriously and accept critical feedback at an early point. Because like when I first started, I was hugely defensive actually about the way I'd played hands, and that came from ego and thinking I was a lot better than I was and stuff like that. And then just the ability to say, here's like a punt I made. This is funny. Like I fucked this up. I'll learn from it, but also analyzing at the same time. And I think you're right. People do get really caught up on like the two extremes of poker. There's so much content that's just like, look at this big pot. Well, look at these dollar bills. Look, here's D-negs in a hand. Whatever. Like, fine. People like that on one end of the spectrum. And then we have like Run It Once, who I make videos for, who are a very rigorous academic training site, and a lot of videos on there of mine are like, and now we come to slide 16 where we'll be covering a blah blah blah, and it's like extremely serious, right? And I think like combining the two is something that everybody could do a better job of, and if there was more content like that out there, I think we'd have a lot more newer players learning the rigor of poker instead of just donking around for years and thinking they're getting better, when perhaps they're not. So right,
that's not to say that there's not value in that. Obviously I have like a third of my content or more is that as well, like that sit down and right, let's look at every single spot in minute detail and never smile. but I think it's good to have both. But
it's easy to get jaded with poker if you take it really seriously. I've been there many times as a coach where I've felt I don't want to do this game today because it's just too monotonous and it's too complicated and my brain needs a break. So humor is good, lightheartedness is good, and games within the game are most definitely good.
Agreed.
What about the audience that you're kind of appealing to right now? You mentioned that they're mostly micro stakes players. Do you feel like that's somewhat of a neglected part of the market then? Like players who are playing 5NL, 10NL, but they want to take the game seriously. Are these guys being left behind somewhat? Are they being ignored, given that we've got all this high stakes content, we've got all this serious elite content, and we've got all this silly, let's just have fun content? Does there need to be more stuff in the middle, in your opinion?
I mean, there are definitely those people, like from my experience and like generally from my stream, I get a lot of people on my stream. Like I know like the pool really, really well now, and obviously a lot of them know me. And a lot of them are like very serious about improving, and they play a lot of poker, and they'll drop in the stream daily, and they'll have it on while they're playing, and they'll talk through their spots and stuff. So there is a lot of ambition in the microstakes pool to improve, but like we've already said, like there's barriers to entry, and the rake is high. We're not the like best players in the world right now, right? And to beat a game for 15 big blinds 100, to make 5 big blinds, to then grind that up to the next stake is hard work. And are they being neglected? Obviously, like I would say yes for sure, but like whose responsibility? Who's going to be like, all right, well then they're being neglected. Let's do something about it. Like the sites aren't doing anything about it. Doesn't feel like the subscription sites necessarily doing much about it. So there's like quite a selection of players that in the micros that I would say that could definitely beat the 25s. The 25NLs, the pools that I've seen of those, but they just can't because they haven't got the role, and they're trying to, bust their way through insane rake structures and just having very little to go off of. So I guess, yeah, my community in a way, like it's small, but I know them all like really, really well now. And I like to think that they find that learning from not necessarily my play on stream, because sometimes it's sometimes it's not the best. But I try to make good decisions all the time and try to provide an environment where these people can start to think about the game in a different way and not feel like they are, alone in their struggle to smash through these micro stakes rate structures. But yeah, neglected. It's hard to say they're neglected because like whose job is it? It's no one's really responsibility. The businesses want to make money off of of them, and as the games are beatable for 15, 20 big blinds, it's unlikely. Obviously 500, you can't make 10 big blinds 100 at 500 an L. So like very often no one would play, right? So the pools are still going to fill up regardless, and that's just a business sense move. But at the same time, it's definitely I think more harmful to poker than these HUD or no HUD conversations that people like to have.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think as well, like another point of this is that we've gone so far into GTO in the last few years. It's really become the main way of teaching at the higher levels. It started to take over quite a lot, to such an extent that even like exploitative play in general is sort of questioned as unsolid or unsound in a lot of cases if it's not based off of a very strong foundation.
Yeah.
And from knowing my content, I'm very much on the poker should be learned from its objective structure first, and then we can talk about subjective deviation from there. But given that the objective structure of poker, the game theory as it were, the equilibrium, is so complex and so difficult to understand without already having a big array of concepts, do we find ourselves, Nick, do you think, in a position now where people trying to get into the game who want to learn it right, what's considered right these days is so infinitely more complex than what might have been considered right 6 years ago? Because I remember 6 years ago when I created content for the old site Grinder School, which was focused towards microstakes players, that content was just like, here's a value bet, and here we're going to bet for a bit of protection, and here his range is these things. It was very intuitive, but when you get into this GTO world, is there more of an entry barrier? And what are your thoughts for someone learning the game? What mix of GTO versus exploitative should they have? And is it possible to ignore the GTO or to delay it? Or should we just embrace that, yes, it's complicated, but the sooner we embrace it and get used to it, the better?
Yeah, it's a very complicated question and thus answer. I guess... I don't think you need GTO obviously to beat micros. The problem is like there will become a time. Everyone always says like in my chat and things, when do you think what stake do you think you need like to now know like how to play GTO? Like how far can you get without knowing GTO, etc. And the answer is generally like 25, 50 an L, but like it's a very loose answer because like you can always benefit from learning the theory aspects of the game. It's just whether they're worth your time at micros. But then if you play micros and you don't learn about the game, and then you get to these stakes where it's not that GTO becomes relevant, it's just that a lot more players are playing well. So you need to have a fundamental strategy that will carry yourself well in most stakes. And if you haven't learnt that when you're playing micros because you couldn't afford to, or you didn't think you needed it, which is somewhat true. Like people tell me all the time, like, why are you trying to do this in this spot? Because you just need to explo, and that's all you got to do. What about when these players get to 25, 50, and if they want to play those eventually, if that's their ambition, which obviously it should be for everybody, otherwise why are we here? Then you're going to get to the point where this isn't going to work anymore, and you have absolutely no foundation whatsoever of theory, and you'll just get swallowed up. And you'll be back where you started, and then you'll have to start learning then. So, I think that for players in micro stakes that haven't been introduced to it yet, it sounds like a very scary thing, right? Like, can I just get round without having to like think about it? And there are thoughts that from obviously quite prominent people in the community that it's not necessary, and everyone knows who they are, and that's absolutely fine. Like it's possible to do it without. It's possible to make your way up the stakes without a theory-based approach, but I find it useful in terms of learning. Like I've only recently, to be honest with you, bought my first solver because I just haven't had the time, or it hasn't been necessary for my channel, which is probably my priority over my own play, which I've tried to adjust in the last month or so. And, you know, I don't know if I'm allowed to say exactly what program I've used.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah. So GTO Plus is like, it's not that expensive. It's like $75, which depending on what state you are is like, it's less than a subscription for a channel a month. And if you have the correct dedication and you have someone to tell you how to use it, then it has a lot of like really cool parts of it that can help you like introduce yourself to what kind of things a solver might do. And then you can talk to you either with someone that you know about why, or just think about for yourself why it's doing that. Like on GTO Plus, you can run it, and then there's a section where you can play against the solver, and it will tell you whether what you've done is right or not. And I personally I'll sit there for like 2 hours playing against it until I've got the spot down. Obviously, it's only one board, but like I like to get like 5 optimals in a row before I move on to the next spot. But I find that really useful, and then you'll find yourself being in those situations quite a lot. And like people will generally just take like this, oh, you know, I guess I raised before the flop and a third seems good on this board. A third seems good because, you know, I've 3-bet and a third seems okay. But in fact, and what I've most learned in the last month is there's just a lot of boards where you just want to go quite big and the third just accomplishes nothing. And that is like a theory element of the game that you're probably not going to, like, obviously you can be like, oh, I'm not going to bluff this guy because he's going to be really bad really often. He's just not going to fold very much. And my value from betting is not going to be from getting him to fold. It's from just going to be from pure value betting. So I'm not going to bet. But what if you did want to bet? What then what sizing makes sense to use to maximize your EV? And so even if you're exploiting, you know, that's the kind of thing that it will teach you that on, like, this is the board that I was running like for 2 hours, 2 days ago. It was 10-8-4, 2 spades, small blind versus hijack.
You'll never forget that board in your life. You'll go to sleep at night and you'll just see 10.
Yeah, I know. I
spades.
literally won't. No, I literally played that board 200 times against the hijack.
If that board comes up and you're at my table, I'm just gonna muck straight away.
Yeah, just snap fold. And basically it just never wants to bet small, right?
Yeah.
And whether your opponent is bad in the hijack or not, you know, whether you want to bet small or big is an important thing to know, because, you know, and the reasons why we'd bet bigger rather than smaller are important. So, you know, I guess I've got to really, again, around the houses on this answer, but my worry would be that if no one looks at it, then they will get to stakes where their strategies and their exploitative natures are no longer relevant, and they're not like super well versed in the game enough to, you know, carry themselves through those stakes, and they'll just get bumped back down to rake
because them. I think what people need to understand as well is that by playing, you don't play GTO, you don't study a solver so that you can copy an exact equilibrium strategy mindlessly. Yeah. You do it, as you said, so that you can learn more about the facets of the game objectively.
Yeah.
And I think there's far too much of this black or white, is it exploitative, is it GTO? They're not alternative schools of thought that clash with each other. It's not the world is flat versus the world is round. Rather, it's just a framework objectively and then a subjective deviation to that framework. That's all we're talking about. So to say that you can survive in something with merely a deviation doesn't make any sense to me at all, because it's a bit like saying, oh, well, how do you get to Sweden from here? Well, you just go 32 degrees from the point that you're currently at, and then you don't know where the point is where you're currently at, so you're just randomly picking a direction on the compass, therefore. So I think I agree with everything you said there. And I would just like steer, you know, the audience when they ask you those questions on your channel, like, why are you doing blah, blah, blah? You know, you could say, well, that might not be the highest EV play. You know, that maybe I should have done an exploit here, but it's perfectly reasonable for me to study lots of theory and apply it as and when I see fit and deviate from it in the same way. What we're building is our back structure to our game. You know, we're installing all the modules we're going to need. And we shouldn't just do that because we'll need it in the future. We should do that because it will also eliminate mistakes in the present. There's 2 ways you lose money in poker. and they both amount to the same thing, which is not taking the highest EV line. The first is, your opponent exploits you, or you don't capitalize on something your opponent's doing, and it's like an exploitative loss, right? And the second is you just commit a bet size, a line, independently of what your opponent's doing, that is lower EV in theory and in practice. And the more GTO you know, the less bad moves you make. It's like in a game of chess, if you don't hang your queen, you're not going to lose as many games of chess, right? If you don't know theory, you're going to hang your queen more often. You're going to hang a knight more often in poker equivalent. So I just think it's such a silly debate. Like I've written here in my notepad file, Explo versus GTO, as if they're these two conflicting viewpoints. I do think it's the most absurd thing ever, like that perspective.
It is. I mean, the amount of things I get in my comments, and I've mentioned it to you, like, it's just, I try to make decisions that, to be honest, like I would have lent on this side a lot. Like I exploit more than the average person, I would say, but I still try to make fundamentally sound decisions wherever possible. And it seems like whenever I do it, I should have folded. In the comments, like, you shouldn't have called there because he just never doesn't have it like there. Yeah. And then it's just like, well, that's really not what I want to put out there in terms of my content. I don't want to create a bunch of people that are just folding every single spot. Like, not create people. That sounds really weird, but like influence people to make just pure folds in like spots where, yes, they're going to have it a lot, but like, let's just pick our best call downs. Like, let's not never call. Let's just learn why we might want to call. And maybe, and there was, I don't know if you've seen the Punt or No Punt with Ben, but like there's a few in there that there was one hand I got absolutely crucified for on stream. And when I put it out in a highlights video, and then I showed it to Ben, he was like, I'm snap calling. And I was like, oh, I thought this was going to be close, because like, I mean, it's that kind of thing. And I did lose the hand, and then obviously like people that are, it's very, very, very easy to be results based. Like everyone wants to see results when they're playing microstakes. All people care about really just seems to care about is results. So I understand that, but at the same time, striking a balance. And I will say, since I have got back into contact with Ben, I tend to be more on that other side of the argument now than I probably was a year ago. Well, I definitely am. But like, it's a lot easier when you have someone, like, thankfully he's very generous with his time with me. Like, if I send him a hand, then that I think is like on that borderline, and he'll just be like, don't worry about that. It feels a lot better to have someone that is obviously very, very good to be able to tell me, don't worry about that. That's okay. You can do that. And it doesn't matter that you lose, because it's just a fundamentally sound decision, and that will just stand you in good stead no matter what. So yeah, it's obviously a very, from my position in terms of being a content creator from microstakes, it's very, very, very hard to put this point across and then call these spots and just never win. Obviously, I do win sometimes, but those are, those ones get forgotten obviously a lot easier than when I call and when I lose, which obviously does happen because it's poker, right? And it's microstakes, but I don't want to get to 25 or 50 an L when I do play it. And I don't want to have no idea why I should call, or have not even thought about why I should do what I should do. I just want to have confidence that my decisions are solid decisions, because at the end of the day, it's like it's a game, and I like understanding why I want to do this in the game rather than it's hard to explain what I'm trying to say, but you understand. Yeah. I don't want to be the person that tells that builds a microstakes channel and tells people how to improve, and then just like, well, we just can't call here ever, guys, because he just always has it. Like, that's just not helpful to anyone improving.
No, it's not. And it's like, even if your intuitions are spot on, I think what you have to understand as a poker teacher is that you don't teach intuition to somebody by saying they always have it here. You can't just expect that because you see an exploitative situation very clearly and you see a big imbalance in your opponent's range, that by saying they've always got it here, you're instilling that same pattern recognition in your audience. What you're actually instilling is a sweeping generalization in them, and you're actually training them to say they've always got it here in a myriad of different spots that are completely removed from the one in which you made the exploitative insight in the first place.
Yeah.
So I think you're doing the right thing educationally, and I don't think for a second that you or I or anybody else who has that style wants to make a play that they're confident is losing in a vacuum. Like we're not going to call the river when we know it's losing because GTO says to do it. We don't believe you when you say they always have it here. That's the problem. We believe you feel that way. We believe that it's hurt you more being wired as a human when you've lost your stack than it's mattered when you've won a stack because you're wiring. But we do not believe you that we don't win 28% of the fucking time when we call a 3/4 pot size bet. Because that's all anyone ever bets in the micros. They never even overbet, so we don't even have to worry about it. 30% is not very much, right? So I know it feels like you don't win very often with certain calls. That doesn't make them minus EV. You have to take the worst of it a lot when you're getting 2.5 to 1. That's just poker.
Yeah, and those situations are going to be dwarfed by the amount of good decisions you're making overall.
Yes, because you avoid that sweeping generalization of they've always got it, they never bluff, they never fold. I mean, this stuff makes me sick to this pit of my stomach. It makes me want to ban everybody from teaching the game unless they've passed like a course or something. It really does. It makes me like, I hate it, because like the amount of students that rock up who previously had a good game and then someone once said to them, like maybe they watched like a run at once video and they just heard someone say this spot is underbluffed, and the echo of that affirmation like bounced around their head in some other spot, and now every time a spot comes up they go, but don't you think it's underbluffed? It's like, well, do you think it's underbluffed? Why not? You can't just repeat what people say. So theory avoids that big exploitative pitfall that awaits you when you start assuming things based on feedback from your emotional brain. That isn't intuition. That's a misfiring survival program, and it's not good intuition necessarily. Yeah. Okay, I could go on all day about this. I think I need to do a 2-hour podcast one day about Explo versus GTO. I want to talk more about you, Nick. You mentioned that your game might have suffered a little bit based on just the streaming environment, and maybe you perhaps neglected your own development somewhat in favor of, the channel and the content you're putting out, which is a really cool thing. How has that affected you only playing sessions? You mentioned this to me at the start, that you only play sessions when you're streaming, and what lessons have you learned about how to move forward with your own development that you maybe didn't know, say, a year ago?
Yeah, a lot. I've learned a lot. In the last 2 months, I've learned more than I have in my life playing poker. But yeah, it's specifically coming from a streaming standpoint, I don't play any sessions off stream at all. And that includes, like, obviously I do make videos that aren't streamed, but they're also recorded, so it comes under the same umbrella, right? I started by playing, so here's just the general story of what's happened to me this year. I started streaming on the December 27th to like 5-10 viewers. And obviously I already had my YouTube, which had like, I don't know, 400 or 500 subscribers at the time, maybe less. Probably less. And I had a few people that were interested that came over to watch me from there. And I was playing 3 tables of 10-0. Obviously I wanted to like learn how all my buttons work, like switch over and stuff. And so I wanted to start at 10-0 so I didn't have to think at all about too much while I was like getting going, right? So I played 3 tables and it was really, really manageable. And I won I played for a week at 10-0 and I won 44 buy-ins in 20,000 hands, and I had like maximum of like 10 viewers. And I was like really, really confident. I was like super happy with it. I was streaming every day. I streamed every day until like a week or 2 weeks ago. I streamed every single day. And I played this session at 16-0, which you can find on my channel under like lots of like capitalized red writing and minus numbers, where I just got absolutely pumped for I basically won these 44 buy-ins. I was like, right, 16-0, no problem. Sat down for 3 tables, got absolutely ruined, like beyond ruined, and a lot of variants, and some bad play in there as well. Like quite a few people had some problems with them. You won't have seen them, but you'll have your own opinions as well. But I just had this horrendous session and it felt really, really bad. And I had this bonus that I was doing these stars. I don't know.
No, the dreaded breakback challenge, the demise of every aspiring poker player. Yeah.
Yes. So I ignore them now, right? Because I just don't have the time with all the content to play as many hands as they want me to play. But at the start, I did. I was like, right, fuck it, I'm gonna do the whole bonus, and it was $200 bonus. So playing 10-0, 3 tables was not gonna get me there. Like it just wasn't. And when I'm streaming, I have to explain all my decisions all the time, right? Yep. Otherwise, I'm just super uninteresting. So I was playing like really happily, and then I had this 16-0 session. I got absolutely battered, and I realized that if I didn't play more tables or play higher, I wasn't gonna make it. And I'd already committed myself in my head to do this. So what I did, which was the biggest mistake of not my poker career, but like the biggest mistake I've made this year by far, was instead of playing 16, because I was like, I've taken this, I was like a mental hit, but at the same time, like, I did just feel more comfortable at 10 at the time. And I was just like, look, I'm just going to play 10, but what I'm going to do to make up the volume is I'm going to play like 5 hours a day, and I'm going to play 4 tables. And it was without doubt the work. Like I definitely lost. Like, I mean, I was winning at like 20 plus blinds per 100, and I went from that to like literally 0 blinds per 100. And I played like this for the rest of the thing, like 2 to 3 weeks. And everyone knows probably the graph, it just looked like this. Like,
yeah, it
went from this to like that for the 16, and then just like this
yeah.
for like 30k hands. And it was just the most nonsensical thing I've ever done. And my red line was absolutely awful. And during this time, I was streaming to like 50 people, maybe 40, 50 people, and I was talking to them. I'd look back, and my hands would just be different. Like I'd have auto-folded something, and then I'd have had like 2 seconds left in the spot. My time banks would all be dead. And if I wanted to remove my tables, I would have to readjust my window captures. So I was just like, okay, I guess I've just got no time bank. So I'd look over, and then I'd come back, I'd have no time bank. I'd just click a button, and I was clicking buttons for 30k hands on 4 tables while streaming. I don't make excuses for like results or whatever, but it was my decision. So it's my fault. Like what I did was my fault, but I'd committed myself in my head to doing it, and I thought, I'm building my channel anyway, so what's the worst that can happen? Mm-hmm. But I just got destroyed and obviously I got destroyed. Like any reasonable player is going to get destroyed unless they're like, their brain works in ways that mine doesn't. I like to think I can multitask well, but I can't handle talking to 50 people and playing 4 tables.
And you're also a newer player as well, right? You've not learned poker for so long that everything is like subconscious competence. So the minute you like swamp yourself with too many decisions, your brain will revert back to like a previous state that is its subconscious competence and that is known better, and that thing that's known better that you can apply under that pressure, unfortunately, is a really poor historic archived version of your game. Yeah. So
exactly. I was just clicking buttons for 3 weeks.
Yeah,
but it was awful, and I wish I'd never done it, and it's like pains me. But it's done now, and I've learned from it, and I'll never play 4 tables again, at least on the stream. And I was playing 3 tables. I was like, this is fine. And then I was getting towards like 70 viewers, and then I realized I couldn't even do that without my red line just being awful. Yep. And I was uploading daily videos. I had literally 0 time to study whatsoever. I would go in completely like without study to every single session, without warming up, which is what I tell everyone that ever asks me what's the best approach to playing. Warm up, clear your mind, all this. I was uploading daily for like 2.5 weeks, and then I just had to make a video saying, look guys, I am literally like probably 5 times worse than I was at the start of this year.
Yeah. Just
because I haven't thought about the game. Yeah. I haven't had a chance to think about the game for a month, and my results were just like, you can see, it's just very, very evident where everything happened and why. And I just was not happy being a content creator, being an educational content creator, and making these like not just poor poker decisions. I wasn't even making poker decisions. I was just making poor life decisions around poker, and that was just not allowing me to make any improvement in my game whatsoever. And I was just tanking. My results weren't like, I wasn't going off a cliff, but like they weren't good. And 10 big blinds, 100 rake as well. So yeah, now I'm just playing 2 tables of 16 or 25, which I'll probably play soon. and it's just, I feel a lot better. Like the stream also seems to enjoy looking at every single spot, and interaction is obviously up as well. Like I don't have to sacrifice either, it feels like. So
yeah.
Another way would be that I get bum hunted like super often. Like quite a few people in the pool know me by now, and I'll get people just being like, "Oh, finally managed to get you. Good luck," and then I'll just 4-bet jam. And I'll be like, what am I supposed to do against this? And like, I don't play that, and half of them I don't even know what their screen names are. And I'll get people slow rolling me for full time banks. I'll get, people just generally coming after me without telling me who they are. Mm-hmm. And whilst you're playing like 3 or 4 tables, it's just it all just stacks up. So there are like pluses and minuses, and I love streaming, and I love the like chat and the community that I've seemed to be able to create, but there are times where you're just like, oh, for Christ's sake, I can't have a normal life anymore.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's it really.
I remember like when I used to stream for PokerStars, and the channel would attract like quite a lot of riffraff as well, because it's a mainstream channel, right? So when you have like 1,000 viewers, which I don't get on my own channel yet, unfortunately, but like some people would come along and they're just looking to see, some famous poker player make aces full and win a stack or something. They see me going like, oh, in theory, we have about a 55% bet frequency on this flop. This hand bets less than the mean hand, blah, blah, blah. And they're just like, fuck you, man. Yeah, fuck you, you nerd. You're shit.
Yeah.
You're shit. You're talking a load of shit. You don't know what you're talking about. You're playing 100 NL, man. You suck. I play 500. It's like, yeah, I'm sure you do dip into the 500 pool every now and then with your minus 64 BB per 100 loss rate. But it's not an easy gig, because the way these people are is they're looking for a fight. They're trying to vent. They're trying to like be toxic. And if they see weakness, if they smell that you're suffering like an animal, they will pounce on you at that point. I've always found that when I'm having a good stream and I'm running good and I'm winning, it's all, yay, yeah, go Pete. And then when I'm having like a bad stream and I'm getting stacked left, right, and center, the trolls sort of crawl out and they're like, yeah, you suck. Not only are you getting stacked left, right, and center, and you're down 7 buy-ins today, but you also suck. So there. So it's annoying.
And also when you lose, like, we can be the biggest robots ever, like, but it's still poker, and we still don't, no one likes to lose, right? So when you're streaming to like, 70 whatever people, and then you make this like decision which you're not sure about yourself and you want to look at later, and then you get like 10 people just being like, you're the worst, man. It's just like, oh fuck. And you have to like just power through. And obviously you shouldn't make content or be a content creator if you can't handle that kind of response, right?
Totally.
But it is it's definitely something that you have to consider. Like if someone said to me, do you think I should start streaming? I would just be like, no, definitely not.
Yeah, it's not easy on the bad days. It makes, in some ways, it makes the good days better, because you get to like share the enjoyment when things are going smoothly with people, and it makes the rough times even rougher, I would say, about streaming. Do you plan to play Volume eventually not on stream, or are you going to stick with this ethos that every session you play is streamed?
I think whilst now I'm making 3 videos a week, it's still pretty hard for me to find time to play off. Like if I play, it's just generally better for me to stream as well, because I get like, I'm trying to work towards partner, which is not easy, and I don't even know if I'll get it once I qualify. Mm-hmm. But it makes sense to me now to stream if I play, because I get to play, and also I get to chat with the community, and also work on my numbers for Twitch. So right now, in terms of like my spare time, I just don't really have the time to play off stream as well. I would like to, but I generally will just I'll play like 1,000 hands a day at the moment, I would say. So I stream for like 2 to 2.5 hours, and I'll play 1,000 hands on 2 tables. And then I will study with, there's a couple of people that I know from my channel only that I will talk to and study with. And I'm just trying to make sure that when I am playing, I'm making very, very good decisions. And I'm very, very conscious that I don't want to burn myself out again. So I would like to start finding some time to play off stream. But at the same time, it makes a lot of sense to me to stream if I'm playing.
Yeah. And I think you'll learn from that burnout thing. Everyone does that a few times in their career, I would say. And you may even like learn from it and then unlearn again and do it again and be like, shit, I did it again. Like I can never do this again. You do it another time. It's just the way humans are. sometimes we do have to learn the same lesson over and over again, and mistakes you make at this point in your career, I would say, who cares? Like, as long as you learn from it now and you don't do it for years and years, it's the most important thing. But it sounds to me like you've got the right approach now. Focusing on every decision, not letting any decision slip under your sort of scrutiny radar. I think that's the optimal way to go. Right, shall we give the fans what they want and talk a couple of poker hands here, Nick?
Yeah. So if they're here because they know me, then they'll already have seen these hands on like a couple of recent videos. Maybe one of them I didn't is not from a video. Although it's probably featured recently. But there's two from this week that I don't know when this video is going up, but there's two from the videos that I put up this week that I've just had the most not heat for, but like just like not people being like nasty or anything like, oh, this is just but like just being like, you're just never going to win there kind of thing. Like exactly the kind of thing that blood boils your blood.
Yeah.
So I'd be interested to see what you think about those.
So I'm probably, like you described, Ben a Bad Beat as like very hardline GTO, this is fine. Then you have people on the other end of the spectrum. You never ever win here, I know what his hand is. I'm probably a bit in between, like closer to the GTO side, but it's possible that I will agree with these people, but to a lesser extent, and it's also possible I'll just be like, don't know, not going to make a decision, not going to assume anything. So King 6 of clubs looks interesting. Let's start with this. Take us through the action.
King 6 of clubs, okay. So, right. We've got King 6 of clubs in the big blind. I'm going to bring over here so that I'm not looking on the other screen. King 6 clubs, big blind, and under the gun opens, who is, like, for all intents and purposes, 200 hands. Not really a known opponent. And we call in the big blind with King 6 of clubs. He opens under the gun, which seems fine. We see 10, 9, 6, 2 clubs, and we check. And opponent bets 2/3. What do you think? I'll let you intervene with what you think we should maybe be doing here.
Yeah, I mean, I actually noticed a discrepancy when I was going through your punt or no punt videos about format, right? So when I coach, I actually, and we don't have to do it this way by any means, it's not a coaching session, but I actually get the student to formulate their thought process first before I influence it.
Okay,
And
fine.
then I can
That's
sort of
fine.
give feedback. If you're cool with that, I think it makes for an interesting format. Yeah, what do you...
Yeah, that's fine.
Tell me what
We'll
you
do
think
it
about the
channel.
first...
Whatever you want.
Okay, cool. So first off, I'll just talk about pre-flop quickly, then I'll get your opinion on the flop then. So the fact he 3x's might just, you know, if he's unknown, sway the odds of him being recreational somewhat. Like, I'm not saying it's definitive, but it probably increases the percentage chance of him being a recreational player, which is something we might want to bear in mind if things get close later, right? What do you think we should do against the big flop c-bet with bottom pair and a flush draw? We have King 6 of clubs on 10 of clubs, 9 of clubs, 6 of hearts.
Yeah, so I think being this deep and having a hand with like quite good equity, like you said, against a probable weaker opponent, I do like to put some more money in. I can, if he wants to put more money in with like a draw, then I'm obviously going to get, I'm obviously going to be like quite a big favourite against most draws. Obviously, like if you had like queen, even if you had like queen jack of clubs, I block a king, I've got the clubs covered. So I generally lean on the side of putting more money in here. Certainly against a small bet, being out of position as well. But I think all these three streaks are super interesting, and you could go either way. But I do elect to go for a raise on this occasion.
Yep, I think raise is good. I think against weaker players in general, or likely weaker players, I tend to, with pair plus draw specifically, I tend to veer more towards raise because I feel like the bluff capture properties of pair plus draw diminish against this part of the pool. Like, I don't think facing the triple is something that's as prevalent, although the sizing does kind of indicate strength. Like, I would say that I hate that term in general, but I think that either this is just a guy that c-bets too much, or if it is someone who's being selective, the selectivity here will be too high EV. Like, the range will be too high EV that uses the big size. That's generally just a population read. Because people are not very good at picking some of the lower EV bluffs in their range. Like, what you have to understand about constructing a c-bet range on a board like 10, 9, 6 is that while you will not be betting often, that doesn't just mean betting flush draws and open-enders and value hands. It means betting some flush draws and some open-enders and value hands, but also checking some, but also betting at quite a high, some frequency with a lower EV draw, like King Queen or Ace 7 of diamonds, or just something like that at some frequency as well, right? It doesn't mean being so selective that your bluffs are practically value bets. So people can end up under bluffing like already with this sizing, especially regs, I would say, who pick this size. I like raising though for the reasons I gave. Like I just think against weaker players, bluff catching the alternative gets a bit worse, and I always like people to think about a line not just based on that line, but based on what they're comparing it to. What's the other option, right? Think of it this way: if you have a multiple choice answer, you're playing like Who Wants to Be a Millionaire or something, and you're not sure about the answer to the question, you might get there by ruling out other options in the multiple choice, right? So poker's a bit like that. So like the flop raise, villain calls, turn is the king of hearts, so 10, 9, 6, king, double flush draw board, 2 clubs, 2 hearts. We go ahead and bet 2/3 of the pot we have a ton of equity, we've just made 2 pair. It's a value bet, it's much better than investing by checking. I can't see how checking and investing that way could ever be better, since the bluffs will be so hard to find here already. I want to just touch on this for a second, right? What do I mean when I say bluffs are hard to find on 10, 9, 6, king, double flush draw? Well, he's already filtered by betting big and calling a flop raise. This condenses his range. The king hits just about everything unmade apart from exactly like club, ace, 4 of clubs, or something like that. So if you check here, what are the chances that an average opponent at these stakes is, or any stakes really, is going to be able to turn the right hands into a bluff? He's much more likely to err here by calling too much than he is by betting too much in this spot. So I think your turn bet is just good and necessary, and any other line would be a mistake. River is the queen of clubs, which is kind of a very strange card. I've never seen a spot where we have a flush and 2 pair on the river before, but yet we don't have like the best hand. I mean, we have a pretty good hand, but this is a very bizarre situation. So we actually start with a check here. Our opponent goes all in for 2x pot, and we make the call. So let's start with the first node, which is whether we bet or check on the queen of clubs, 10, 9, 6, king, queen, club draw completing on the river. We have the king high flush. Why do we start with a check here? Let's start there.
Because I am going to have like pocket 6s, pocket 9s, and pocket 10s. 10s actually most of the time, as far as I remember. I'm just gonna have a lot of sets that really, really don't like the queen of clubs. So I feel like I needed to check to protect against just being run over with those hands. So yeah, that was just my main thinking really. And obviously, if he did have a hand, like I'm not sure, like maybe ace 10 of hearts specifically, I guess.
Ace queen of hearts, yeah. 10, 9.
I
mean, okay, maybe not 10, 9. It's got a bit of showdown value.
Yeah. But like, maybe just something like, it's hard to have like the ace of clubs specifically here. Like he could have ace king with the ace of clubs for sure. I don't know whether I got back and turn that into a bluff. My main consideration was that if I am going to have sets and like 7, 8 here a bunch, which I will, like a whole lot, and I can't see any reason why I would do anything differently, then I'm going to need to check my flushes. So I'm pretty much, I think, just checking range.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think like in theory, this is a spot where, although some of your range does make the nut flush on the river, like villain will be the one with way more combos of ace x of clubs. And if you think about this, it's easy to see why you would veer at some other point, some other node in this hand earlier at some frequency with ace x of clubs. You might 3-bet pre as well. Big blind against under the gun. It'd be very common to 3-bet ace 5 of clubs. So villain gets to the flop with all of these combos. We only get to the flop with some of them. Villain probably bet calls a lot of these combos on the flop. We only raise with some of them. We don't always bet turn with them, although we usually do. He calls the turn with clubs that contain a king, whereas we don't bet clubs that contain a king that often unless they're 2-pair, right? We may check, we may bet small. So yeah, I think it's a really weird spot where actually our range is really suffering on this queen. I also think he's probably very likely to have a jack compared to us. Like, I don't think we have a ton of combos of some queen jack, sure, but we don't have queen jack off. He's just gonna have a jack. He's gonna have ace jack off sometimes. He's gonna have ace jack of hearts more than we will statistically as well. It's just gonna have more good stuff here than we will. So range check makes a ton of sense. Like, I could see range check being a thing here at Equilibrium. Would I check this river in reality? No, absolutely not. Never. The reason I would never check this river in reality is that I am confident enough in this spot that I don't feel like I'm making stuff up when I recommend a deviation. There are some spots when I'm playing badly, Nick, right, where I might actually think, hey, Pete, you're making stuff up right now. Stop that. You're just trying to give the people some explo line here. I don't think I am here. And I think the problem is that, you were struggling quite a bit there to come up with stuff that villain would bluff, right? So if the pool is under bluffing this spot when we check, and if we can agree that they're under bluffing this spot, it might not mean that we check fold the second nut flush, because that depends on what their value range is and how hard it is to have the nut flush. It might mean we do check fold, it might not, but it probably means that betting is better than checking. Given the amount of combos of just like 2-pair sets, some straights, stuff like this in our opponent's range, I think I would start here with a block. And the reason I'd start with a block is that I don't actually think that pool is going to bluff enough if you check, and I think you have a very, very profitable value block here, like extremely profitable, and I think it's just much better than checking. So I would just start by asking in a spot like this, to what extent do we think population will underbluff here? And when you start listing all the flushes they can have, they're going to need to have quite a few combos of bluffs, and if they are going to struggle to get here with less than 2-pair, or less than pocket aces, or less than ace-king, it's just going to be really rare that they end up bluffing the river. If you do run into that guy that understands that aces is now a bluff, and he didn't full turn with aces, or ace-king is now a bluff, and he didn't full turn with ace-king, remember they can full turn with those hands too, right? They don't have to call turn with all of the ace-king or aces. Then you definitely want to check, and in GTO, check call here's a perfectly lovely line. But I just wouldn't start by checking. If I thought a spot was very underbluffed, I would just make sure I got my value bet in, because it is a comparison between those two.
Yeah, I mean, that seems very reasonable. I think block is a very good option. As played, we check.
And then we face the bet, and now we forget the node we just talked about. We've got a whole new decision. Villain jams for 2x pot. Thoughts on this one?
Yeah, it's worth noting that, I mean, I don't know if people can see, but 74 big blinds in the pot, 142 big blinds is the jam, and we do cover. So it is a 2x pot effective jam.
Yep.
Obviously, like you say, quote, very underbluffed spot. He is going to have ace-x of clubs a bunch, but obviously, like, if we, and this is the thing, right? Like, this is probably a spot that we are talking about. I think that there will be people saying that we can explo fold here, because, like, he doesn't really have, like, the only thing that wants to do this is the ace-high flush. Like, he's not going to do this with, like, what? Apart from maybe jack-8 of clubs that he opens, right?
I think straight flushes, weird straight flushes and nut flushes are the value range here. I think we have a bluff catcher. That's safe.
But ace-5, ace-jack, ace-4, ace-3 of clubs, they're all going to be in there. I think, like, on the turn, he just has a plus EV call, I think, with the pot odds and then implied odds. So ask people, do they think that this is a spot where people, I mean, this is a 10 and L hand. Do you think people are not going to have the nuts in, like, all the time? But how, like you said before, like, we just have, like, a not as many ace of clubs. Like, how many ace of clubs do we get to this river with? Ace of clubs flushes? Not many, because we 3-bet, like, ace-5. I guess we have, like, ace-7 and ace-8, but then ace-10 and ace-9 are blocked. Ace-6 of clubs, I guess we can have as well. But, like, not many, right? So obviously ace-king of clubs and ace-jack of clubs in a 3-bet. That's really it, like 7-6 of clubs, I guess. But, like, you know, we don't have any ace-high club flushes, like, that often. So when we're talking about whether we want to, whether they're just never bluffing here. So we're literally just going to fold the top of our range then. Is that right? I'm not having it, basically, is what I'm saying. I just refuse. I refuse to fold it.
Yeah, I think we need to be a bit careful here. Like, I think if we're going to accept the assertion that they always have it, then we certainly should fold the top of our range. It would make absolutely no sense to cut off our nose to spite our face and be like, oh yeah, you're never bluffing, but I still can't fold the top of my range. Like, that's silly. But, like, I think the point is here that you're maybe not happy to accept the claim that they're never bluffing like that, because it's so absolute and it's such a barbaric thing to say, just like, never a bluff. It's just too strong to be accurate, right? So that's clearly false. Like, the claim they're never bluffing is false, because it basically accuses pool of having close to 0%. Semantics come into this, of course, but as far as I'm concerned, it accuses pool of having close to 0% bluff frequency. They're going to have attractive bluffs here. Another thing I'm going to say is that they're going to have aces with a club and ace-king with an ace of clubs, which is a very attractive hand to go all in with, if this guy understands a little bit about poker. The combos of a nut flush that he's going to have are probably not massive. Like, they're ace-jack, ace-8, ace-7, ace-6, maybe ace-5, ace-4, ace... Okay, there's quite a few of them there. I count them, maybe like 9 or something like that. But still, if he has, we're calling to exploit, we need 40% equity. If we can find like 6 bluffs here, 7 bluffs here, we can call. Can we find that many bluffs? It depends. There's like 3 bluffs that are like aces with a club, like ace-king with a club if he always bluffs it. There's a few more. It's going to be like another, there's like ace of clubs with 2 kings, like another 2. It's a stretch. I think calling here is a stretch unless the bluff frequency is quite... Like, I think if you do the objective analysis here of what they need to do to be bluffing often enough to make this call profitable, they have to have quite a high cognitive frequency when they're holding one of those candidate bluff hands. Like, they have to follow through pretty often, right? So I wouldn't go as far to say that this is always a value hand, but I might still fold here just based on the idea that we need 40%. That's quite a lot. Like, we need them to be bluffing almost half of the time they're making this bet. And if they have 9 nut flushes, yeah, I'm just not really interested in how much of my range I'm folding. I've had the opinion that this is underbluffed the whole way through from the turn, so why do I then need to like start saying that if a bluff catcher is at the top of my range, it needs to be called? Like, I wouldn't entertain that thought, but I don't hate calling. Let me say that. It can't be too bad, because if they do bluff at some frequency, you'll be fairly close, I think. But
here's the thing for me, like if you're finished.
Yep, go ahead.
There's like another angle of 10-0 exploit here, because when you check this river at higher stakes, it means that you can have a whole bunch of things. But I think that at 10-0, people are thinking on, like, the first 2 levels of thinking include, this guy really didn't like that card when he checks. Yep. I can win here, and honestly, I don't even think he needs to necessarily have ace whatever of clubs to bluff, because I think a lot of the time here, like I said to you before, like, in a lot of ways, my check is an exploit check, because I expect a lot of the 10-L pool to read this as, wow, he just has a set or a stray, and he really didn't like that queen of clubs, so I guess I'm just all in. And I think that adds a lot more, like, obviously you're going to have those theoretical bluffs that make a lot of sense, but I also think it adds some more bluffs to, like, this guy just can't call bluffs, which obviously make no sense to do, but all at the same time. There are a mix of theoretical, really nice bluffs, and also a lot of exploitative, fuck you can't have it bluffs.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. Like, he definitely can bluff with stuff other than the things I listed. I guess I'm just kind of, the things I list, I'm trying to catch the guys that only bluff when they say, oh, I have this blocker. Like, there's some part of the pool that needs to have that blocker to make that play. And then, like you say, there's others who don't, right? So the true bluffing frequency here is very hard to estimate, but you need to kind of like decide what percentage of the pool would be willing to bluff random stuff, count the combos of that, find a frequency, divide it by it. It's so complicated and so hard to know for sure whether this is losing or winning to make this call, that I think I would just say the spot doesn't really matter. Like, I don't think you're going to lose super often here. I don't think you're going to lose like way more than 60% of the time. I think the claim that they're never bluffing, that this is almost always the nut flush, is just clearly wrong, and it's too far. But at the same time, if we're going to say a spot's underbluffed and you're going to maintain it's underbluffed, you probably should think about folding all of your bluff catchers without any consideration to how high up their range your range those are. Because in a spot that's underbluffed, depending on how severely it's underbluffed, all bluff catchers become minus EV calls, right? Basically, or 0, or maybe the best ones go from winning to 0 EV, depending on the extent of it. But I wouldn't check the river. If we're going to say it's underbluffed, then I think it's a bit of a contradiction to want to check the river because it's underbluffed, but then having bet want to call. Like, that sounds a bit weird, because underbluff just literally means the bluffing frequency is less than in GTO, but that's a hard claim to explore. And I think what we need to be careful of here is this tendency people have to say underbluffed when they actually mean it's not bluffed that often, right? But if the value combos aren't very many either, and the pot odds are there, it doesn't need to be bluffed that often. So underbluffed doesn't mean not often bluffed. It means actually bluffed less relative to the value range than it should be. So that's a very careful thing, you know, with wording. We need to be quite careful about that, I think, before we throw around terms like underbluffed or overbluffed.
So, results or not?
Yes, results.
Do you know the results?
I am looking at them, but you go ahead.
So we call, and our opponent has ace 10 of hearts for the top pair on the flop, backdoor flush draw on the turn, and complete whale off on the river.
I think it's a great play by your opponent. I think it's a brilliant bluff, and I think it's a bluff that will work 90 to 100%
against this pool. It will. Yeah,
it's a great play.
It will.
Yep.
But yeah, whale off is harsh, but like not something you're ever going to expect, right? But here is my point, and I don't know if we're doing another hand, are we?
Nah, we'll finish with this one. So go ahead.
Yeah. Yep. So there are two other hands that I brought that were another way of like talking about this exact problem that I have on my channel, where these three were all in videos, right? The next two I lose, right? And they're similar calls. Okay. One, I've got a full house and river, and I call to 2x pot, but it's like the bottom full house. Another one, I've got the nut flush, where I lead river for half pot and someone jams, and on a full housey board, right? I call both and I lose both of those. This one I call for 2x pot, and like you've just explained very, very reasonably, we're not probably going to win 40% of the time here against normal players in this pool, okay? I heard nothing about this hand, not a peep from anybody when I posted this. No one said a damn word about this hand. The other two have like 5 comments each.
Or probably for this hand you got excellent call, man, excellent play, brilliant play.
I got nothing.
Or you didn't even get the positive feedback.
I got nothing.
What I get is, I get like advanced play when I make a bluff and the guy folds, and when I make a bluff and the guy calls, I get spew idiot. It's just like, okay, so you guys want to win 100% of pots then. You literally want everything you do to lead to the best possible outcome. Take up a different fucking game. Poker's not for you.
Agreed. But anyway, I just thought it was interesting. The people will just look at the ones that, oh god, you lost. Oh, clearly, you're obviously going to lose there. But like, they'll never even. It just doesn't cross their mind. Like, okay, yeah, you won that one. But it doesn't. They don't think about to comment about that. You know.
Yeah.
And I guess like all of these, and I do. This does happen. Like obviously, 2x potting and calling doesn't happen very often. At 10 and L, because obviously people really don't 2x pot, like you said before in the one earlier today, like people don't really, they just 3/4 pot bluff, they don't 2x pot bluff. So like, yeah, this is like quote unquote super under bluffed, but like no one cares when I win these spots, and they do happen. Like I'll call bluffs a lot and they'll be bluffing, but no one cares apart from the people that are in my chat trying to like learn. The comments of my YouTube, they don't care. They don't care that I won this hand. Like I've not heard anything about this hand at all. They just care that I might be wrong about that. There may be one. I'll have to check. I may be being harsh, but what I do know, maybe I'm a victim of this as well. And I just remember when people tell me I'm awful for calling off. But you know, I think it's interesting how selective our thinking is when it's confirmation bias at the highest order.
Yeah.
People will just look for the things in my videos or my stream that confirm that no one's ever bluffing, and when they see this, it's straight to the back of your mind. It's akin to variance. You know, you never run good, but you always run bad because you ever remember when you run bad. Really, selective memory is definitely something you have to overcome to improve at this game, I would say.
And I think at micro stakes, that's a great point. I think at micro stakes, people are extremely guilty of just being very, very terrified and nitty because they get this idea that calling and losing is like a very bad sin. Like for some reason at micro stakes, the thing people are most afraid of being is like a loose spewy station, whereas when they start moving up, then it starts to become more like, shit, am I defending enough here? Am I getting run over here? And that makes sense because the aggression does get higher as you move up, but at the same time, there are lots of spots at 16 NL that are completely overbluffed. I don't think this is one of them. I think this is a very clear call in theory. I think if you fold here, it's a massive exploitative deviation, and therefore the spot doesn't just need to be underbluffed, it needs to be extremely underbluffed for it to be a fold, and it might be. It is. I think it is verging on extremely underbluff, but that's why I bet river, right? So that's my analysis of that hand. But like in general, the problem is that people are much more afraid of that feeling of paying people off. That makes them feel dirty. It makes them feel like, oh, I can't believe I gave that guy my money. When actually, what about that time you missed a bluff on the river when you checked down as the small blind with 10 high on King Queen 3, and you didn't realize that in equilibrium, if you check 3 times, you blunder a big blind in a single raise pot. You blunder a sixth of the pot. That's disastrous, but you're not thinking about that because you're obsessed with all these big hands. These are the entertaining hands, but I don't know, final point, Nick, what do you think is the bigger problem for people? These spots where they face 2x pot all in the river, these make great punt or no punt content, right? But are these the spots that hold people back, that cause that bad red line? Or should people be focusing more on nitty gritty?
They should focus on nitty gritty for sure, because like in the same way that people are underbluffing here, they're overfolding in those spots you're talking about when you've got 10 high. And you can print a lot of money in those spots if you know which combos to choose and when, and the small pots where people, you can bet a lot of turns when someone checks twice, stuff like this.
That's a good exploit.
Just attacking weakness is something that people won't do because they're in this mindset of, oh, I'll let this one go. It's only 5, 10 big blind pot. There'll be a fish in the next hand, The problem is like when you play like that, and there is a lot of like super nitty stats at microstakes. The problem is when you win a pot, you win 90 big blinds. And when you lose one, you lose 100, right? So if you wait for callers all day, you lose 10 big blinds 100.
It's horrific.
So you have to choose, you have to find all the spots. You can't just sit there waiting for hands and hoping that you fall on the side of variance. You have to be thinking about why you want to do things and thinking about every spot as much as you can, and never say to yourself, I'm still sometimes a victim of this to myself, like never say to yourself, I'll let this one go because there'll be another hand. And play the hand on the merits of the hand. And that's the only way you're going to improve like all your win rate. Like my red line, like I said, was trash for so long because I just wasn't thinking about the game. I was just clicking buttons.
Yeah.
So now it's much better. And yeah, I feel myself improving rather than not at all.
Yeah. Look at the small pots because they come up all the time, and the mistakes you make in them will be multiplied 100 times more than any call you make for 2x pot on the river in a spot you never ever face. But yeah, I accept your invitation, Nick, to come on Punt or No Punt or Quibble and do some work on your channel with you. You
know how it works? You're gonna have to bring 5 hands.
Okay.
And the last one has to be like special, and then I won't have seen them, and I'll give you we score each hand, and hopefully you come out on top. But who knows?
Do I have to accept your verdict? What if I'm like, nah, bro, that was totally not a punt? What if I get defiant?
You can say I don't think this is a punt. Like Ben was on saying I think this is a punt, and I was saying I think it's not. Like you could disagree. Okay. It's not going to change the score though.
Okay. Sounds good.
What it will do is it will undermine my authority. But you like obviously having you on would be awesome. I'm sure that people want to see some of your stuff on there. So yeah, anytime, man. Like I'm sure we can hopefully sort something out.
Let's do it. Let's set it up. Nick Eastwood, thank you very much for joining us today, and we'll do more stuff with you soon. It's been a pleasure.
I appreciate it a lot. Thank you so much for having me on.
Don't curse the darkness, light a flame. Change the picture, change